He was simply my daughter's colleague, courteous, reserved, perhaps unusually perceptive. I never imagined that offering him a place to stay one evening would lead to moments that left me questioning everything I thought I understood about connection, and why certain memories refuse to fade. Before we begin, tell me, where are you joining us from today? I love knowing our community spans across so many different places. Drop your location in the comments. Now let me take you back to the evening that shifted everything. It started on a Wednesday in early autumn, one of those crisp evenings when you crave comfort, a warm blanket, perhaps some herbal tea, and the quiet of your own space. My daughter Jessica had stopped by for our weekly dinner. She'd moved across town 6 months prior, but we maintained this tradition. I cherished these evenings, even when she treated my kitchen like her personal restaurant. That night, she brought someone along, a colleague named Adrien. I'd heard his name mentioned before, the thoughtful one in her department, the listener rather than the talker. I vaguely recalled seeing him at one of Jessica's work functions years back, but people change. And Adrien certainly had. He stood in my entryway, no longer the uncertain young professional I'd briefly met before. Now he carried himself with quiet assurance, his presence somehow both gentle and substantial. Dark hair swept back from his face, and when he smiled in greeting, there was a warmth that made me feel genuinely seen. Dinner unfolded easily. I prepared my grandmother's chicken recipe while they hovered nearby, occasionally stirring something or sneaking tastes. Adrien insisted on helping with preparations, moving through my kitchen with unexpected comfort. He wasn't like Jessica's usual friends, distracted, always checking notifications, half present. Adrien paid attention. His gaze would rest on me a moment longer than expected. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Midway through dessert, Jessica's phone rang. She excused herself, mentioning something about meeting other colleagues for drinks. This happened frequently. She'd visit, eat, then disappear with barely a proper goodbye. But Adrien remained, explaining he was too tired for the downtown scene and asking if he might stay a bit longer. We relocated to the living room, just the two of us now, the house settling into its familiar evening rhythm. I offered chamomile tea, and we settled onto the sofa with something mindless playing on the television, mere background ambiance. He asked about my photography. He'd noticed the collection on the far wall, prints I'd been curating for months. Most people barely glanced at them, but Adrien asked questions. What drew me to black and white? How did I choose my subjects? Did the process bring me peace? It felt strange and wonderful, having someone genuinely interested. Most days, my only conversations were with my elderly cat. I hadn't experienced this kind of attention in years. When midnight approached, I asked if he needed transportation. He hesitated, mentioning Jessica had driven them both. There was an awkward pause before I suggested the spare bedroom. You're welcome to stay, I said, keeping my tone casual. It's late, and honestly, I'd feel better knowing you weren't navigating public transit at this hour. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite identify. Appreciation? Warmth? Something deeper, are you certain? I don't want to intrude. You're not, I assured him. The room's ready. Besides, you'd be doing me a favor by finishing the scones I baked yesterday. He smiled. That genuine, disarming smile that felt like a small hook catching somewhere near my heart. We said goodnight. I showed him to the guest room, pointed out fresh towels, then retreated to my own bedroom. I lay there staring into darkness for what felt like hours. It wasn't just the house's usual creaks or the occasional sound of traffic outside. Something else filled the air, an energy I hadn't felt in years, a weight in my chest I'd almost forgotten existed. I got up, telling myself I needed water. Perhaps I wanted to adjust the thermostat. Perhaps I was lying to myself about my motivations. Walking down the hallway, I noticed soft light spilling from the guest room. The door stood slightly open. I hesitated, then knocked gently. Everything okay? I whispered, leaning in slightly. Adrien was sitting up, the blanket pulled at his waist, reading something on his phone. His eyes met mine with what looked like understanding. Couldn't settle my mind, he said quietly. Sorry about the door. Didn't realize it was open. I don't know why I stepped inside. I don't know why my heart was thundering in my ears. I couldn't sleep either, I admitted. This place gets too quiet sometimes, he smiled faintly. Would you like to sit? I did. Slowly, I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed, maintaining respectful distance but close enough to feel warmth radiating from him. We talked about loneliness. He told me about moving frequently as a child, never quite finding where he belonged, how visiting our home always felt grounding. I shared about the silence after Jessica moved out, how evenings stretched endlessly, how sometimes I'd fall asleep on the sofa just to avoid the emptiness of my bedroom. Two people from different generations, sharing the same ache. There was a moment. I remember it precisely. A long silence. Then he reached out tentatively, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, my breath caught. Not from shock, but from recognition. Our eyes met, and in that stillness, everything shifted. The air thickened, not with desire exactly, but with emotion, understanding, comfort. Two people discovering they weren't as alone as they'd believed. I could tell you I stood immediately, offered a polite goodnight, and left. That would be easier to reconcile with. But it wouldn't be honest. I stayed. He didn't rush, didn't move toward me carelessly. He simply let his fingers rest gently against my cheek, searching my expression for any sign I wanted him to stop. I didn't. I don't know how long we remained like that, holding the fragile space between us. But eventually I found myself leaning forward. Not just physically, but emotionally, releasing years of quiet longing I hadn't even acknowledged. When our lips met, it wasn't dramatic. It was tender, soft, the kind of kiss that communicates more than words ever could. It felt necessary. When I pulled back, I kept my hand on his shoulder, steadying myself, breathing through the thoughts cascading through my mind. This wasn't what I expected tonight to be, I said, almost laughing at the absurdity. Me neither, he replied, voice low and sincere. But I don't regret it. Do you? I should have. Perhaps part of me did. But what I felt most strongly was clarity. This wasn't about age or societal expectations. This was about two people in a quiet house offering each other something profoundly human, genuine connection. We didn't cross further boundaries that night. I stood eventually, kissed his forehead gently, and whispered, "Good night, Adrien." He looked at me with such warmth it nearly undid me. "Good night, Margaret." I walked back to my bedroom, heart racing, limbs trembling, not from shame, but from feeling truly alive. The next morning, I woke early. Sleep had been elusive, but there was something grounding about watching sunrise filter through the curtains. I wrapped myself in a robe, padded to the kitchen, and started coffee. I heard the shower running and let the sound settle around me, while questions circled. What now? Was last night just emotional overflow? Confusion? Or something more substantial? He emerged later, hair damp, wearing yesterday's clothes. He looked uncertain until I handed him coffee and gestured toward the table. "I reheated some pastries," I said. "Close enough to homemade." He smiled, that familiar, disarming expression appearing again. "Perfect breakfast," he replied. We sat and ate mostly in silence, not uncomfortable, but cautious, as though neither wanted to be first to define what the previous night meant. Eventually, I cleared my throat. "Adrien, about last night," he looked up. "Yeah," I paused. "I don't regret it, but I don't want you to feel obligated or confused." "I'm not expecting anything." His expression softened. "I'm not confused. You don't intimidate me, Margaret. I'm not sure what this is." But I know I felt something genuine. That stunned me into silence. He wasn't speaking like someone uncertain. He was expressing emotional clarity I hadn't expected. He left an hour later, mentioning he'd contact Jessica. As I closed the door behind him, his presence seemed to linger. My home felt fuller, my body warmer, my heart more complicated. Days passed. Jessica mentioned nothing, seemed oblivious. But Adrien messaged me. First, simple thank yous. Then longer thoughts about art, about things we'd discussed. Then 3 days later, "I can't stop thinking about how you looked at me. Do you think about it too?" I stared at the message for what felt like hours before replying, "Yes, I do." That began something even stranger. A quiet, secret connection growing through messages, glances, pauses in conversation when he'd visit with Jessica again. About a week later, Jessica came by to watch something on television. Adrien joined. I made snacks, laughed at their jokes, tried acting normal. But every time Adrien looked at me, I felt it. That undercurrent, that knowing, that pull. Age later, after they left, I found a note on the counter. Torn paper tucked under the tea canister. I unfolded it slowly, hands trembling. "I want to see you again. Alone. Only if you want that too." I sat at the kitchen table. Note clutched between my fingers, staring into soft lamplight, wondering how the most unexpected night of my life had transformed into something I couldn't stop wanting more of. The next time I saw Adrien alone, it was because I invited him. I struggled with the decision for days, my conscience and curiosity in constant conflict. I reminded myself I was a grown woman, 58 years old, not naive or foolish. I'd weathered heartbreak, loneliness, silence. I knew what it meant to give too much and receive too little. But this, whatever was happening between us, felt different. It felt intentional, careful, and strangely healing. I sent the message on Friday morning. Direct but warm. If you're free this weekend, I could use help with the garden, he replied within minutes. Saturday afternoon. I'll be there. Saturday arrived slowly. I spent too long deciding what to wear, not to impress him, or so I told myself, but because I wanted to feel good, to feel seen. I settled on a comfortable linen shirt and well-worn jeans. No makeup, just lip balm and a touch of rosemary oil. When the bell rang, my heart fluttered and I disliked feeling so adolescent. Adrien stood there with work gloves visible in his back pocket. That same easy smile. Ready to dig in? We spent the next hour kneeling in soil, pulling weeds, trimming overgrown lavender along the fence. Late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, and I caught myself watching how light touched his face. How comfortable he seemed here beside me. We didn't talk much, but it wasn't awkward. The kind of silence that only exists between people who feel safe together. At one point he paused, wiping his forehead. You've created something beautiful here. I try to maintain it, I smiled, though it's been somewhat neglected lately. He looked at me then, not just at my face, but through it. We all get neglected sometimes. I couldn't respond with words. Instead, I gestured for us to go inside for water. We stood in the kitchen side by side, pouring cold glasses, leaning against the counter. You didn't have to help, I said after quiet moments passed. I wanted to, he said simply. That's when I turned toward him fully. The space between us closed naturally, drawn by some quiet gravity neither wanted to resist. I reached out, brushing a dirt smudge from his cheek. My fingers lingered. His hand came to rest lightly over mine. I think about you, Margaret, he whispered. Every day. I don't know what this is, but I know it's not nothing. Something broke open in me, a dam I'd held shut for years. I'd spent so long being careful, hiding parts of myself that still craved affection, attention, intimacy. And here was this man, my daughter's colleague, telling me the truth I hadn't known I'd been waiting to hear. I leaned in, and he met me halfway. This kiss was different. Not tentative like the first. It was purposeful, genuine, needed. When his arms wrapped around me, I let myself fall into them fully, like I belonged there, like I'd been holding my breath for years and was finally allowed to exhale. We didn't rush. We moved through that afternoon as if time had expanded. Hours slowed as we found ourselves on the living room sofa, comfortable together, hands exploring presence more than physicality. It wasn't about desire. It was about being truly seen. I remember resting my head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on my arm, whispering, "This isn't supposed to happen." He tilted his head toward me. Says who? I had no answer. Evening arrived, and neither of us rushed to change what was unfolding. We cooked simple dinner together, grilled sandwiches and soup. It tasted like comfort, like home, like something entirely new. When it was time for him to leave, he kissed me at the door, not like goodbye, but like a promise. "I want to keep seeing you," he said. "Even if it's complicated," I nodded. "Me too." As I watched him walk down the steps and disappear into twilight, I realized something beautiful and strange. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to fill a void. I was choosing to let someone in. The days that followed were equal parts peace and turbulence. Peace in the simple joy I felt when Adrien messaged mornings, asking how I slept or what I was photographing. Turbulence in the storm of thoughts, whenever Jessica called. He was my daughter's colleague. That reality didn't disappear just because our moments felt authentic. One evening, Jessica dropped by unexpectedly. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and I could tell something was on her mind the moment she entered. "Hey, Mom," she said, hugging me. "You seem different." "Good different," I blinked. "Different?" Yeah, lighter, actually. She studied me. What's going on? Are you seeing someone? I smiled awkwardly and waved her off. Please. I've just been taking better care of myself, she grinned. But there was curiosity in her eyes I didn't like. Adrien mentioned you two had coffee the other day. Without me? I froze for a heartbeat too long. He returned something he'd borrowed, I said quickly, forcing casual tone. Stayed for tea. Nothing more. Jessica didn't press, but I knew she'd noticed something. Her radar for discomfort was always sharp where I was concerned. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table in silence, running my fingers over wood grain, asking myself the questions I'd been avoiding. Could this, whatever it was with Adrien, exist in the real world? Sharing glances and secrets in my home's quiet was one thing. Imagining him beside me publicly, meeting friends or worse, facing Jessica if truth emerged was another entirely. That night, Adrien came by late after work, hair mussed, eyes tired but bright when I opened the door. He didn't speak, just pulled me close and kissed my forehead. Can I stay tonight? He asked. I nodded and led him inside. We didn't do much, curled on the couch, watched an old film with sound muted, held hands beneath a blanket. I think both of us knew we were running out of shadow space. He broke the silence first. Would it scare you if I said I feel something real here? I didn't answer immediately. My throat tightened. Not from fear, but from the terrifying beauty of being truly seen. No, I said softly. What scares me is how much I feel it too. We talked for hours that night about what we wanted, what we feared, what this might become. He told me being with me made him feel grounded, seen, safe. I confessed truth I hadn't spoken aloud in years. I didn't think anyone would ever want me like this again. Not as a woman. Not as someone desirable. Adrien looked at me with such intensity it brought tears. Margaret, you don't see what I see. It's not your age. It's not about what people might say. It's you. You're warm, thoughtful. You make people feel at home just by existing. I looked away, embarrassed by how much I needed those words. But he gently turned my face back toward his. You make me feel like I finally arrived somewhere I didn't know I'd been searching for. Tears came then, soft, quiet ones, the kind that fall when your soul finally exhales. In the morning, we made breakfast, laughed over burnt toast, and danced barefoot in the kitchen to old music from my small speaker. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that light. A week later, I suggested we talk with Jessica. It was my decision. I didn't want this, whatever it was, living in secrecy forever. If it was real, it needed honesty. The conversation was difficult. Jessica didn't speak for a long time after we told her. I watched her jaw clench, eyes narrow, thoughts storming behind silence. Finally, she looked up. I don't understand it, she said. But if you're happy, Mom, and he's genuine, then who am I to judge? It wasn't blessing, but it wasn't condemnation. For now, that was enough. Now, weeks later, Adrien and I continue, whatever we are. We don't need labels. We take walks, share meals. He reads while I photograph. Sometimes he falls asleep with his head in my lap, and I run my fingers through his hair, still amazed this life chose me. I know the world would call us unconventional. I know whispers would follow if we walked hand in hand publicly. But I also know this. Nothing about what we share feels wrong. It feels human. It feels earned. And it feels like a second chance I never saw coming. So if you're wondering whether connection can find you after 50, whether it can arrive in unexpected form at inconvenient times, I'll tell you what I've learned. Love doesn't check birth certificates. It checks hearts. And sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones we never planned for, the ones that teach us we're still capable of being surprised, of growing, of opening our hearts when we thought they'd closed for good. This is my story. Imperfect, unconventional, but undeniably mine. And I wouldn't change a single moment.